All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for a podcast number 43.
The Power of the Hero's Journey.
Right, and you've heard about the hero's journey. There's a lot of tropes around it. There's a lot of specific kind of structure about it that's a bit obvious, and then some that's a bit nebulous. So we're going to be talking about it in general. We're not going to go super in-depth here.
Yeah, there's all kinds of places where you can find awesome details about the hero's journey, but we're going to be talking about why it's such a big thing and can be so powerful in the first place.
Right, but before we do that, we're going to give a shout out to one of our VIP patrons who just joined recently, William McMartin. Thank you so much for your support, dude. That means a lot.
It really does.
Yep. Thank you so much for supporting us and everything we do.
Yeah.
So with the hero's journey, the classic example I think for our generation right now is Star Wars.
Yeah,
you get
pretty
Luke,
much.
and he's a desert boy. He might be kind of a chosen one figure. He might not.
Right. The prequels haven't happened yet.
Yes, exactly. But he gets kind of the the call to action.
Right.
You know,
he's got his normal life.
He starts off with the normal life, and he has to leave that all behind.
Yep.
And then he goes through, the initiation, the struggle,
all the growth that happens there, the conflict.
Exactly.
And then he comes back. Not like he doesn't actually come back to Tatooine in that case, but it's the idea that
he does go back at Tatooine at some point in the story, but not at the very end.
Yeah.
So in some levels, even Star Wars is a little bit original, even though it was completely just ripping everything off of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Right.
Which, by the way, if you want some direct source material on some of the best direct source material on it, look up anything related to Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Because when we say the hero's journey, that's something that he kind of specifically coined as a phrase for describing a particular type of story.
His writing is can be a little bit hard to digest. So checking out the TV tropes webpage on the hero's journey, that's a really good source. But yeah, it's great stuff. Now, one of the things that just makes the hero's journey potentially so amazing is that it basically is a plot mechanic to keep the focus on the main character and their growth.
Right, and specifically their growth. Yeah. Because generally when you have a main character, you're going to get a lot of focus on them. But specifically, one of the things that you'll see in a lot of stories nowadays is if it's not first person, the main character is almost a non-existent character. Like, they are just there as a plot device to react to things happening around them. And that's about it.
And a lot of the times they come into especially when you're dealing with movies and stuff, not quite as much with books, unless you're going with the serialized, pump them out every 6 months kind of books.
For sure.
But usually the main character is coming into the game with all the chops already, right?
Right.
They're already the super specialized secret agent of the government, or something like that.
In the top 0.01% of their class.
Right, until their government betrayed them, and now they're on a quest for vengeance.
Yeah, there's a specific type of MC that you can hear us talking about here, but generally in the hero's journey, the hero starts off uninitiated.
Right.
They start off in comfort. They start off in an environment by which they have nothing really special to them. The main things that they do have special to them are they have their character qualities. And basically the story will introduce plot as a struggle of sorts to initiate a maturing, a development of those character qualities in combination with whatever will be their essentially their plot relevant quirk that makes them effective for the journey.
Yeah, because so you've heard us talk about how self-inserts get under our skin a lot. But with self-inserts, that's something that was originally a good thing because it's making the character relatable. It's the idea that the everyman can be the hero too, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to be some super special agent spy, that's been doing this for 20 years and is the best of the best.
But because classic stories have taken that trope of the hero's journey and beaten it to death with some really bad executions along the way.
A lot of times people don't like to do that anymore.
Yeah, which is why I would say one of the most, wasteland of story kind of genres right now, especially in film, is fantasy. Sure. Lord of the Rings is not the standard, let's say.
Right.
It is the place you want to hit. It is the top of the mountain, But if you look in just general fantasy, stuff in maybe shows or movies, it's bad.
Yeah, and a lot of times,
it's bad.
A lot of times it ends up getting completely taken for granted, right? Because in the case of, like, say, Lord of the Rings, right? Frodo, he starts out in Hobbiton, or Bilbo starting out in Hobbiton. You know, it's the place where, oh yeah, everything's normal. They don't have to worry about a thing. And then suddenly, you know, a wizard comes knocking on your door, right?
Yep.
Or Nazgul, potentially.
So that moves us into the next bit, which is kind of the call to adventure / refusal.
Right.
And the reason for that being so powerful is it sets that relatability aspect as an anchor for the audience. So you've obviously been a human being for any number of years to where opportunity has come knocking at your door. Now, the thing is that everyone has had opportunity come in some form of another.
Right.
But the thing is, the opportunity is generally not obvious.
Right.
It's veiled. It's not something that's comfortable. It's not something that even really is something that we generally tend towards.
Yeah.
We are in our nature beings of habit. So we look at those things and we go, oh, that shakes up the habit and the norm. So we refuse them most of the time.
And a lot of the times this will be shown in the hero's journey. Not all the time, but they'll oftentimes use it because, like you said, those things do happen. And a lot of the times it's actually something that is very bad.
Like, a lot of the time.
In stories specifically, it's a lot of
my
the times,
village was destroyed.
Right, you know, and it's like, oh, whoops, well, now you're forced into it, right? but it's those things, you know, bad things happen in life too, right? And it's only looking back that we realize, wow, that helps me grow so much. That helps me become the person I am today.
Oftentimes, the thing that ends up being kind of the worst thing to happen to your life becomes an opportunity based on the way you react to it. So the main character ultimately is a reactive character in the beginning of the hero's journey. And that's the important thing. I think that a lot of hero's journey archetypes for the main character leave them in the reactive state. And basically what happens is that mentor that comes in and is proactive and basically initiates them on that path, and then obviously dies because they're a mentor. That's all mentors can do. You can't have a mentor live throughout the entire story.
Right.
And you can't have them come back from the dead either, Lord of the Rings.
And that happens so much because it's the whole point of the mentor, you know, dying or being removed from the story in some way is so that the main character, you know, it's sort of like a progressive way to force the main character to be like, hey, you've got to take charge now, right? You have to basically start making those choices and, you know, striking out on your own, almost like growing up without the safety net now. Right? And that can be very relatable. That can be an awesome thing to have happen if you make it so that the death of the mentor isn't cringe and just like, oh no, they died. Oh, who would have seen that coming? It's not like I cared about them or anything.
Or not even really a seeing that coming bit, but just actually developing the main character. One of the things that we mentioned in the beginning was this needs to be focused on the main character and their growth.
Right.
The thing is that with these hero's journey kind of stories and stuff, especially in the fantasy one, you'll see way too often all this jumping around to other things to set up plot, mind you, things not focused on the main character and their growth, so that by the time the mentor dies 12 minutes in, we don't care about that. You haven't focused on their character at all.
And if you
so why should we? Why should it matter to us?
Right.
It's not even about whether or not it's predictable, because yes, the hero's journey is predictable. It's a plot outline, so of course it's predictable.
Right.
But if you actually develop the time with the characters in the beginning, and you keep that character-centric aspect of the story focused and honed there, you can have some really heartfelt moments.
With
your mentor like that.
And what you said about the whole like fantasy thing, because oh my gosh, that is so true. Usually it's because people are looking to something like a Lord of the Rings or something like that.
Absolutely.
Where the world is so rich that they're like, I want to make sure it's like that. But then they forget the fundamentals and the basics, right? Lord of the Rings was amazing because it had the hero's journey with this rich world behind it, right? Not just because it had the rich world. The characters are the story. And the hero's journey does not have to just be in a fantasy.
It really doesn't.
It's oftentimes the most recognizable as a fantasy, but it can be for anything.
It can.
Like I just last night started watching The Godfather. I didn't finish it because it's like 3 hours long.
I can't believe you just now started watching it.
Yeah, I know. Watch those old classics, right? You know, why didn't I do that sooner? But I realized that it was, this is the hero's journey still. with the mentor and the main character that doesn't know what they're doing, and then, they get forced into a situation they're not prepared for, and they need to make do, and, they leave their comfortable life, and then have to come back later and all that stuff. It's like, wow, yeah, you can do it anywhere. Like this could be the main character going to college, like pretty much anything.
Yeah, and inherent within that opportunity of the refusal aspect of this is an element of choice. So we recently started watching a show called Berserk, and Berserk deals with a lot of the questions of free will versus fate.
Yep.
And oftentimes in these more fantasy type hero's journey stories, there is an object of destiny in the story.
Sure.
This is your chosen path, chosen one. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm thinking of a very particular parody film, and every time they say the word chosen one now. But anyways, if you know what I'm talking about, I don't need to say anything else. So I think that in a lot of ways, the majority of hero's journey stories, not necessarily as many nowadays, because I think we've come to realize that this is a trope and we're subverting it.
Sure.
Is that the hero, the main character, oftentimes gets choice removed from their repertoire. Sure. Their paths laid down in front of them narrow to one.
Right. And then they have to make the most of it, kind of a thing.
It's basically making the most of it, yes. And while that might seem relatable, it takes a lot of agency out of the character and kind of can set the stage for the future points in the story where the character should have a kind of a feeling of agency, but they just don't. And maybe they get that handed over to the antagonist. They get it handed over to that one side character that becomes everyone's fan favorite, and that just happens.
And you can do pretty much anything in storytelling. You just need to know the reasons of why you're doing it.
Exactly.
In like the case of Berserk, Guts does not have a lot lot of agency in this story, right?
Especially in the beginning.
He
basically just walks down the road, I just got my money. And suddenly I'm attacked. And suddenly I am getting attacked by everyone. Like, I'm either going to die or join the Band of the Hawk.
And they use that, and they turn it to their advantage because they have Guts realize, I've basically just been in one constant life or death struggle my entire life. What is it that I really want? What am I going to actively choose, right?
Yep.
And it's amazing. So if you do end up having that be a thing where maybe the main character doesn't have as much agency, they need to come to terms with that. That doesn't need to be something that lasts forever.
They need to come to terms with that. It needs to be something that is tied to the main character's actual growth, but more so, actually, I would say the kind of things where they kind of get introspective and they get a little bit self-aware. I would say more and more so the main characters of nowadays are becoming increasingly more self-aware because in a lot of ways the authors and creators of today are becoming more and more self-aware of their reliance on specific tropes.
Right.
So you get specific kind of instances like with Game of Thrones having all of these main characters.
Sure.
You also find where they might have the call to adventure of the hero's journey localized to a specific character within the story that is one of a few main characters, or maybe have that be a side character. So they're testing it out on like some other aspect there. So keeping the element of choice and agency in your characters is very important. But here's the next bit here that's kind of the universal truth and makes, I would say, all stories really impressive and just impactful. But specifically with the hero's journey is the aspect of the struggle, the initiation, the low points, the high points, and everything in between, basically leaving and coming back. And everything in there, as long as its conflict is centered around, at the very least, one character that we've spent the entire story with thus far. It gives it a lot more. It gives it a lot more weight.
Right, and I think the reason why that is because, like, if you think about stories, right? One of the best feelings you can evoke in your audience is that they feel like they learned something about life or whatever, right, from that story.
They feel like they've improved, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I feel like that's why a lot of the like stories that we watched or read when we were kids, when we were younger, have more of an impact on us because it helped shape the person that we are, right? And with the hero's journey, it can be seen as basically just a representation of how growth and change happens in life.
True.
Right? And
Yeah.
and when it comes down to it, you know, you have to have all these things maybe where you're forced into things and all that stuff, but none of that really means anything if there isn't struggle, right?
Yep.
If they don't get to be brought down to those low points
Yep.
so that they can build themselves back up and find their inner strength and, you know, see what it is they actually depend on and things like that.
Yep. I will tell you, one of the most dangerous tropes to subvert is this one. If you try and subvert the struggle of the story
Yeah.
with something like what One Punch Man does, oh, you better be careful.
Right.
I will
And-
tell you that this is probably one of the most fundamental aspects of any story and or what have you, or even character, is what is their struggle. Because this is the thing. There is the struggle, and as an author or as a creator or what have you, you can look at the struggle and forget that it's tied to specific characters. But the minute you have more than one character in there, you have more than one struggle. If you only have one struggle with like 7 characters, you've done something wrong.
Right. Or you need to just notice that there's the, you know, proportional time to struggle amounts, you know, with how much basically screen time you're giving them, right? Focusing less on the struggle of a tertiary character, that's okay, right? But if they have if they are integral to the story, they need to have a struggle.
I think if they have names, they should have an individual struggle. Like, one of the things I'm constantly frustrated by, especially in the longer running kind of stories, so a book, a TV show, a movie, I give them a little bit more of a pass because
there's less room
to work with. But when you have the room to work with, and you choose to have the actual struggle be centered around a plot point, and everyone just kind of is connected to that.
They deal with the plot point, but it doesn't have any reason to be connected to them as a person. Like, it could be anyone else dealing with the plot point, theoretically.
Right. Or also, you realize what happens once that plot point is immediately removed from their environment as a character. They have nothing to stand on as a character.
Right.
So, guys, like, remember that this is the power of the the power of the hero's journey is it keeps everything focused on the main character and their growth.
Yeah.
But the thing is that struggle is an aspect of the main character and their growth.
Right.
But as you add in more characters, in particular, especially like named, you know, semi-important characters, even side characters and stuff. I get it with the tertiary characters where there's like, you know, gatekeeper number 7 and stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, he doesn't need to struggle necessarily, but you know, those like 2 or 3 side characters you have in there,
give them their own struggle.
Give them their own struggle, not tied to any other character.
And the struggle can take on all kinds of different forms.
Yes.
You brought up One Punch Man. That is a fantastic example, right? Because they basically said, okay, stereotypical superhero thing, and he has 0 struggle in the superhero, like, realm,
in that vein,
in that arena.
Yeah.
But oh boy, does he have struggle in other areas.
He has struggle, yep.
Right? And that's what makes the story. That's what makes it so good. Yeah, we can have all the awesome antics of, you know, him just swatting a giant mosquito and spraying blood over a whole building.
Or being unable to swat one tiny mosquito.
Right, exactly. But it's the parts where he's sitting in his bathtub being like,
life kind of sucks.
Yeah.
What am I doing
like
here?
That's what make us care about him, so that when he does all the awesome stuff, we can cheer.
Yeah.
In addition to just the Sakuga element.
Well, yes, and the whole parody aspect of it as
Right.
well. It's increasingly self-aware as it is with a lot more modern stories as well. So once you've gone through all of this, you have obviously the return. You have your main character coming back to their original world, having gained something, a boon, if you will, as they kind of describe it in kind of stories in general. You know, basically they had, you know, started from the bottom and now they're here. Like they had some progression, and we were able to see it. So when they come back, it shouldn't be some big surprise how people are going to react.
Right.
Like, I mean, sometimes there is, but it's more or less a thing of, you're different. Like, whoa, what happened on the road? Like,
what they've learned, they can now help other people with, you know, teach them or whatever. They might be in the position to be a mentor in some fashion or other. You know,
the cycle continues.
Right, exactly. In the case of Luke Skywalker, it's, even though in at the end of A New Hope, he isn't going back to Tatooine specifically,
but he comes back to his home. He comes back to his family.
Exactly right. He's learned from this from this whole journey. He's defeated the Empire, in a sense, or at least fought back. Of course there will be all kinds of stuff after that.
Yeah.
But then he comes back and it's like, okay, cool, yeah, you saved us.
Yeah.
But,
So with that whole bit of the return, you do need to showcase that. I have noticed a lot of stories more and more nowadays don't want a cheesy ending. There's some aspect of it that is looked at negatively as like, oh, that's not gritty, realistic. It doesn't. It's unoriginal. It's something else out there. So one of the things that's not definite within the hero's journey, specifically within like the tropes of it, is that it comes back to a happy return. The only thing that is happy about this is that the main character
has grown. Yeah.
Now, you could have your main character die even if you wanted to by having the boon be that they left a legacy. They sent back. Maybe their family was in debt and they did all of this to, pay off the family's debt, and it sets them off for life. And no, wait a minute, I'm describing a very specific show.
Yeah. But hey, and it would be hard to say that character, the story was about them becoming a hero.
Yes.
But they still worked it in there.
Right. So having the return be a coming full circle aspect of the the leaving, the call to
departing
adventure,
into the unknown. Yeah.
Yes, when they come back to the familiar, it should look somewhat unknown to them. Sure. I think that this is something that should still be this is a good trope to hold on to. It's that when you go out into the world and you change as a person, you come back to where you were and called home or something like that. I like one of the silliest examples is, let's say you left as a kid and you came back as an adult. Everything's going to look a little bit smaller.
Yep, I was about to say that. Yeah.
Everything's going to look a little bit kind of duller.
You're like, wow, this place seemed to be like so huge and expansive, and now it's like, oh no, it's this much smaller little thing.
The boon, as it will, could just be the character's new perspective on life.
Yeah.
They just come in and they see things differently.
Right.
And because they see things differently, they approach the world differently and they do things differently. And it's basically a starting off point that doesn't go anywhere, potentially, because you're basically saying, hey, there is a story to be told here, potentially, but we don't need to tell it here. I can leave it up to your imagination.
Yep.
There's a lot of power in that. And I think as people look at the ending, the return, and they're like, how can we subvert this trope more and more? I think as long as they're willing to give the main character the opportunity to display what it is like to return, anywhere you go from there after that, as long as you're using some aspect of show, I would say more so than tell.
It
has a lot of merit to it.
And the other thing I would say is that because the hero's journey is such like an old concept for a lot of people, and because it's been so beaten to death, and because of that, people have started to basically avoiding it and constantly trying to do a different spin on it or something like that. Returning to the basics, the classics, can be amazing. Like, because then people are so surprised by it. They're like, oh, that's right. Yeah, this kind of story can be incredible.
Right. You do need to, you need to be aware of the culture you're presenting the story in, so that you know that whether or not it's a good time to return to the old classics.
Yeah.
And then also, if you are going to do that and you feel like it is the right time, be aware of which tropes currently are kind of on the out with people, and maybe ones that you're like, oh, this, I haven't seen maybe a clever application of this in combination with the rest of your story.
Sure.
Utilizing tropes that are overused is totally fine.
Yeah,
like
they're tools.
Exactly. They're tools. They're not something that, once it's been used 500 times, now it can never be used for forever and ever. No, constantly, one of the things that Jacob and I in particular, I've had a lot of conversations with people, they're kind of surprised about why we like specific things, is because we're aware that there are no new surprise is really big out there. Everything trope-wise has been used 500 times. So when we see something take a trope and utilize it effectively, we're like, this person gets it, because they are taking what is out there, what is available for us as storytellers, and utilizing it effectively. So with the hero's journey, that's the power of it. While it may be overused and redone to death, and it's unoriginal as crap, like,
there's reasons that it exists, there's reasons it can be so good, and if you know when to use a paintbrush and when to use a hammer, everything will be okay. Like, don't get those mixed up. Like,
that's a very good analogy there. I like it, because I can tend to be very hard-lined into one or the other.
I can too.
Broad strokes and details. All my problems shift from being canvases to nails. And
right, exactly. Yeah.
Die. All right, guys. Well, that's the hero's journey. It's a very powerful tool. Use it. Educate yourself. Inform yourself if you're going to create any kind of story that centers around a primary main character. Because odds are you're going to end up writing a hero's journey, whether you like it or not.
Or that would be awesome if you ended up writing a hero's journey. It might not necessarily be, but
I mean, you could unintentionally write a hero's journey story and not even realize you're doing it.
Exactly.
So why not use the tools that are out there?
And if that is something that ended up happening, that would probably be a good thing.
Probably, yeah. All right, guys, so we're going to shift over to the questions and answers section of the podcast here.
Again, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, drop them in the comments. We'll hopefully get to them in a future podcast.
First question is from Yasser Montesser. If Dabi turns out to actually be Shoto's brother, how do you think Horikoshi can do it without feeling like it's just a copy of Shoto's backstory? Easily. There are plenty of ways that they can have a character who was the son of, an abusive dad, and ends up either being like Azula, so maybe they resonated a little bit with it, and they left for different reasons. Maybe Endeavor kicked them out for being a failure. Maybe maybe he was jealous of Todoroki's kind of attention.
I almost wonder also if they were maybe meaning to ask if it's to make it not just be a copy of Shigaraki's backstory.
No, I think they're talking about Todoroki's.
Tanya, the future writer, what does storytelling mean to you, and how would you encourage someone to continue their passions? As it was your videos that encouraged me to continue my passion for writing, so now I'm trying to do the same. That's so sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. Storytelling means a lot. If I was going to say what specifically, it's expression.
Yeah.
And I think that oftentimes a lot of people feel like that their means of expression is hampered by their environment. So stories are a creative outlet by which your imagination becomes reality, and you can express things in a much more raw way, and maybe in a way that's also a little bit more subtle, to where you're not like you're not just subconscious vomiting onto someone.
For me, it would be that it's basically a way to experience life, in a sense, and learn from things, because you learn from life experiences, or that's one of the best ways to learn. But in this case, it's someone else's life, and by going into that story, into that world, you can learn as if you lived, even though you didn't really.
And you're touching upon the story consumption aspect of storytelling. And I was talking about the creation of storytelling.
Gotcha.
But that's cool. Yeah. Those are two different aspects and very cool. So how would you encourage someone to continue their passion? The main thing, I would just basically say you can do it. One of the things that is kind of silly.
You can't force them to.
Yeah, you can't force them to. But if I was to encourage, an anonymous, just specific person to continue their passion, I would say to take some time, go and look within yourself and see if this is your passion. You won't have to ask many questions of yourself before you figure out whether or not it's your passion.
I think they're asking, how do I encourage other people to continue their passions?
Right, I know. Yeah, and I would say you need to ask them whether or not it is something that is their passion. Because
law of attraction, basically.
Yeah, when I hear that someone says they want them to continue their passion, that sounds like someone who thought this was their passion. They stopped.
Sure.
Why did they stop? I want them to continue.
Yeah.
So I would say it's okay to kind of get with someone and be like, hey, maybe this isn't your passion. If it is, you basically just believe in them. You believe in them 100%, and you never, ever, 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 ever doubt them.
Right. And if you continue on your passion, then they might, be like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this too.
Well said. Lex the Graceful Rival asks, is it better for novice writers to stick to one genre, try out as many as possible, or keep their writing as varied when starting off? I think that the general rule of it is you want to just write. It doesn't really matter what your genre is. You just want to do a lot of it.
But I would say stick to one genre, because, okay, for your first book, stick to one genre, right? The idea of wanting to be the special snowflake and do a bunch of different things, no. Know the story that you're trying to write.
Sure.
And write that
finish
story.
Stories.
Yeah, finish stories.
Well, the thing that I would say is it doesn't matter what genre you're doing.
No.
The main thing is that you write stories nonstop for a very, 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 very long time. If you're a novice writer, I would say I'm a novice writer as far as like comparing myself to other people, but comparing yourself to other people isn't really a helpful thing anyway. I would just say that if you haven't written, say, 100,000 words, you should write 100,000 words.
Right. It's the million bad words before you get to the 100,000 good ones. Yeah.
Exactly.
Zelios, do you think a born as evil character that aren't just forces of nature can be well written? They can be, but it's tough because you basically need to make them so own that born as evil aspect, right? Make them compensate in other areas, make them entertaining to watch, or whatever.
Yeah. Also, I think the whole quote unquote born as evil is a very good thing to bring up, because when he said it in air quotes. So, well, he just did in quotation marks, but I think that is a very limited character.
Right.
What you are basically limiting yourself to is basically like the horror villain. Like when you think of born as evil, when I think of born as evil, I think of a character that has no redeeming qualities. They started out as evil. Nature designed them to be evil. There was no nurture that made them evil.
Yeah.
They were as evil as they were going to get from the beginning. And that happens, I'm sure, but that's not a common thing. So the thing is that most evil is nurtured, just in the same way all good is essentially nurtured. So have it be very much either a story about the question of whether or not there was nurture involved in them becoming this evil, or just have it be where the character is like unequivocally just evil from the get-go.
And you can make it so that they appear that way, but it's not like confirmed that they're that way. You can just not go into the whole idea of what made them this way.
Cychronia asks, how important is it really to make a reader question whether or not a main character will succeed, especially when the stakes are high and they literally can't afford to fail? Well, this is actually a loaded question. This is a very good question, but
right. If you really want to make it so that the reader knows that the main character is going to succeed, you can do that.
Yeah.
And because it's not that you can't do that, it's that there are punches that you won't be able to make when you have that. What if they literally can't afford to fail, and for some reason they do?
Yep.
And it's like, well, what happens now, right? That just happened. How do I recover from this? Can I recover from this? Night is darkest just before the dawn thing. You can have some awesome moments happen because of that.
Yeah, I would say that the question here, it sounds like this person's in disbelief, basically saying, how important is it really to make a reader question whether or not a main character will succeed? I think it's important. It's very important. How important is it really, specifically when the stakes are high and they can't afford to fail? I think the best example of that is a do or die situation.
Right.
You have a character, the main character in this case, having the stakes high, they cannot afford to fail. One of the things that is generally just the case is you come into a situation with a certain set of parameters in mind. Basically meaning that you think the story can't change the minute that this conflict comes to bear.
Sure.
That is not good storytelling necessarily. You do want the conflict to change the narrative, to change the story.
Right.
If you have everything dynamic enough like that it looks like there's only two ways out of this, why not introduce a third way?
Right,
And
exactly.
And that's something that if you have some really clever writing skills, you can shift that in there perfectly without making it seem like some kind of Deus Ex Machina or something.
Right, the idea that as soon as the party falls from some unspeakable height, there's going to be some sort of flying creature or machine or whatever that's going to catch them.
Yeah, and in those cases, that might be just bad, bad players, and stuff like that, just being stupid.
Right.
But this is your story. You're not relying on PCs to make it,
Exactly.
Work out that way. So,
Summer Looney, how important is it to listen to some of the more harsh criticisms that demand you change your creation? Two things I want to say for this. One, a lot of criticisms will not be based on making your story better. They will be based on the person having a different expectation for the kind of story that it would be. Now, you should listen to those because that way you know what your audience is expecting, and that might be something that you can fix, properly set expectations and such. But you should listen to the harsh criticisms as much as possible, even though it'll, your pride might be hurt, like, reading them, because that is a way that you can learn and stuff. So.
Yep. Lex the Graceful Rival, another question asks, recently a very popular series had a plot twist towards the end of the series that divided the community over it, people arguing whether the foreshadowing was sufficient, so that got me wondering what makes good foreshadowing and how do you foreshadow it without giving it away straight away. Beta
readers? Like people that don't know your story that look at it and then you ask them questions like, how is this going to end at different stages along the journey and see what they say.
Sure, that's a good way to kind of see if your foreshadowing is sufficient.
Right.
I think that in terms of what qualifies as good foreshadowing is you can tell when the story retconned the relevance of past events into the importance of the narrative with 2020 hindsight vision. But if you were able to notice it from the beginning, the first foreshadowing event, it got you asking a question as to what that foreshadowing thing refers to. I think that it shouldn't be a question of whether or not the foreshadowing was good enough. I think that it should be a question of, did the foreshadowing cause the viewer to ask questions? If it was so subtle that they never asked questions at all, then you're like, well, then you might have just made it a bit too subtle. Now, here's the thing. People are different types of readers. So they're going to notice different things. I will say, though, the foreshadowing that I've been noticing in Berserk is a perfect example of just heavy foreshadowing. I have no idea what kind of stuff it's leading up to.
Right.
But it's dripping, it's oozing with foreshadowing. I think that too much foreshadowing is way better than too little, because foreshadowing shouldn't lead to specific answers. It should lead to more questions.
Exactly, right. And in the case of Berserk, that's even something where they basically, they show you, like, far down the road what things are going to be like.
Yeah.
Right? And then they do all the foreshadowing so that now you're like, okay, I have no idea what that stuff really means that I saw. Right? And there's all this foreshadowing stuff, and that just makes it even better.
If you want to break it down even further, foreshadowing doesn't need to necessarily correlate to something specific at the end and be resolved in that way. If we just want to break down the foreshadowing itself, Lost as a show actually did decent foreshadowing. It didn't make good on its foreshadowing as well as it could have.
But the foreshadowing itself was
incredible. So getting them to ask questions... is important.
Right, because it makes them occupied with your story even when they're not, like, actually digesting it.
Yep. And in your opinion, how important is foreshadowing? Any good examples of stories that do this well? Yep, we brought up those.
Berserk and Lost,
and how important is it? I would say it's not as important as we, in our current climate of stories, need to have it be. Like, there's this very specific thing that's very new, is the whole thing of what's going to happen next. And that's a very weird thing to have bleed into things like books and things where the whole bit of content is available to you immediately. I think the reason of that being a trope nowadays is because of the distribution model of media, in that we have shows where you have a weekly kind of drip feed of story being given to someone, and they need to know what's going to happen next, so you want to give them a hook to come back at a specific time.
And actually, that's one of the reasons why I think, like, if you were to compare, like, books and movies, books have way more foreshadowing usually than movies, because most people don't read books in one sitting. So they want to have those things so that they can come back to them.
We tend to read books very quickly.
But you know, and not everyone does, and that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hologram.
Since brothers and you've most likely lived together for your whole lives, what would each of you say is the greatest quality about the other? A trait that stands out and most makes you go, yeah, I'm so proud he's my brother. As an older brother myself, I also have a strong connection to my younger siblings. I would be very interested to know. Also, I want to thank you again for the giveaway. I've managed to print mini art books, and I'm going to send you a picture when they arrive so that you can see for yourselves how much you've helped me. Would love to send you one as well. As usual, have a great day or night whenever you read this.
Thank you so much, Hologram. Hologram, that's so awesome to hear. Like, he sent us actually a Twitter DM. If you haven't seen it yet, you should check it out.
Oh, I need to see that.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, yes, we are brothers. We've lived together for most of our lives. We haven't lived together our whole lives, though. We've been in different places multiple years. Now, in terms of what we say is the greatest quality,
I'm going to go first.
Go first. I've got mine, but I want to hone it a bit.
So I would say with Caleb, it is easily that he cares a lot. And not just that he cares a lot about things, like anime or whatever, right? Because that's great, but it's that he cares a lot about people. And so, like, he's mentioned many times before in our videos how big connection is to him.
Right.
And that is very much a thing. So, like, even at the times when we get on each other's nerves and stuff, he is always very, like, actively wanting to keep the connection strong and make it better.
Yeah,
right?
Thanks.
So I really appreciate about you, and you're amazing.
Okay. Enough. That's too much. All right. So specifically with Jacob, one of the things that's been cool is as an older brother, I get to kind of watch him grow in a way that I think that is just a privilege of being an older brother, because you get to see. They don't basically get that same perspective with you because they've spent less time with you because they're younger.
Right.
But one of the things specifically with Jacob that's just been constantly a strength in particular is there's this dogged desire basically that just churns within him that's really, really strong. And I would say that I describe it often as basically the subdued volcano. Basically, Jacob and I are both. We would probably both qualify as introverts in terms of how we get our energy. I would say the reason why he said specifically the connection thing with me is he's able to notice specific systems and how they work. And I have grown into being a much more functional introvert over the years. But with Jacob in particular, he has grown in the area of which he has always had the I would say the rumblings of like, I desire great things within himself. But the thing is that I think more and more so you figured out how to tap into that in a way that isn't bursty. So I would describe it in the past as that he would all of a sudden just erupt as a volcano with all this desire, and he would just go, I'm going to do all these things.
You might have seen that sometimes in the reaction.
Yeah. And it's everyone has their quirks and stuff. But specifically with Jacob now, it's more of a thing of where like he's caught that down to a rhythm. It's like a vibration. It just kind of and it's like a really powerful motor in a way where you can hear the consistency, you can hear the strength within it. But what you can do is you can hook up to that. Like you can go up to someone and go, I'm all about connections, and sometimes it's fun to just go and then I'm like, all right, I got my inspiration, I got my motivation for the day. So I think one of the strengths is that you can plug into Jacob and you'll feel bolstered in whatever you're doing. So there's a feeling of which when someone is moving fast or powerfully in a specific direction, they create a wake behind them. It's kind of like waves when a boat kind of goes down the ocean or the sea really quickly. If you ride the wake, like on a surfboard or something, you can just stay there indefinitely. You're like, I'm not expending like almost any energy, but it gives you that ability to strike off on your own. So yeah, Jacob, you're awesome like that. Yeah. So Brandon T asks, what do you guys do when you're not having a good day and just don't feel like recording?
We record Haikyuu.
We record Haikyuu. Yeah. What is this? Not recording. We're always recording.
But like,
that was the best answer. Not at all what I was gonna say, but I'm changing my answer. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And the thing is, guys, here's the thing. Specific shows give us specific feelings.
Right.
Jacob and I, while we talk in our discussions in the most logical way we can, we are at our core pretty emotional beings, and that's more evident in the reaction side of things.
Yeah.
And it's a very freeing thing. Let me just tell you, it's a very freeing thing to not have to worry about criticism from people
because of how we express
our emotions. And that's so much what people have to deal with in life. Being able to just be like, we don't have to have a filter. Let's just be ourselves. It's so freeing.
I was totally that kind of person who would basically like way nerd out on something and then realize like, oh my gosh, this person wasn't at all interested in what I was talking about, and
then you just weirded them off.
Yeah, and I just weirded them off.
So specifically with this, when we're not having a good day, and yes, we watch Haikyuu. Basically, what that is there's something in Haikyuu that bolsters us. It gives us happiness. It gives us joy.
Yep.
There's this simplicity to it that just permeates deep within us. So that's a great example. Yeah.
And there will be different emotions and stuff for different shows, but specifically when we're feeling like down.
Yeah.
Like you can't feel down while you're watching Haikyuu.
Can't. Sometimes I do have to go and play Frisbee, even though I maybe scheduled it not on the agenda that day.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's something that's helpful for me.
Mark FL.
Yep.
First, thanks for choosing my question. I really love this channel. You two are my favorite reactors on YouTube, and your discussions are always entertaining to hear. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I hope you can prove my friend wrong. In a story principally aimed to a young public audience, kids, can you still handle serious and more adult topics without the need of the death of a character? At the same time, just because a character or many of them died throughout the plot, it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole story is deeper and more serious. Greetings from Spain.
Okay, so I can tell which side you're on.
Right. I would say the perfect way to prove them wrong is to is to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender with them, because that is a TVY7 Nickelodeon show, and character deaths. What are you talking about?
Technically, here's the thing. Technically, someone dies,
but it's not even on screen, and it's
not even
it's
a main
really
character.
Unclear.
Yes.
But boy, do they go into deep themes, genocide, like parental abuse.
Hold on. So that's death, Jacob.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, deepest aspects of the story is one character's redemption arc.
Yep.
One character's just character arc.
Yeah.
I will tell you that the things that make a story that's principally aimed, like marketed, when you say aimed, it's being marketed essentially to young kids. The way to handle more serious and more adult topics is actually to treat your characters with respect.
Yep.
Generally, the deeper topics that we'll mention that are like, non-capitalized words like abuse, genocide, depression, spiritual topics, politics, and all those things. Those are mature topics, but they don't necessarily have to be handled in a mature way in order to make the story better. Just like character deaths can be in a story, but handled in a stupid, immature way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean anything there. I think what generally happens in kids' stories that are like this is we'll see the narrative and the characters specifically, because they define the narrative, dumbed down so that nothing is confusing to the kids.
Right.
So we know exactly what kind of feeling we're trying to trigger in them. I think that SpongeBob is a great example of where they subvert that well enough by having these mature jokes in there. But overall, the characters are non-existent in terms of, like, depth.
Well, because it's a serialized comedy. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that you can still have mature elements in that and not have, character deaths or anything. But
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Avatar: The Last Airbender is a great example of that. And also, while he might bring that up and be like, there are character deaths and stuff. And I'd be like, oh, really? Like, when does the show actually ever... No, because there is a war. So there is death involved in the story.
Right.
But there is never a named character death outside of one in particular that's not even that clear.
Right.
Because they don't actually show it. That adds more to the story than literally any of the other characters, like the main characters' actual arcs that they go on.
Right. Like Aang struggling with, I have to save the world, but I'm
12.
Yeah, but I'm 12. Like that is a real, like, heavy, deep thing, and they keep it simple so that, it's not going to, confuse the kids or whatever, but they can still absolutely relate to it and be like, wow, that's
Avatar: The Last Airbender deals with so many mature or adult topics, if you will, and doesn't go at all really into the whole idea of character deaths.
Right.
Much at all.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, they had so many rules around how they could talk about death.
Right.
That they don't even say the word death or kill.
Until it's like we've spent an episode discussing the moral quandaries and, issues.
Of would you kill Hitler, basically.
Right,
like, if you had the option.
Yeah. And then, okay, and then...
Queen...
but what was the last thing? Okay, the idea that deaths, a lot of characters dying in the plot, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole story is deeper and more serious. One of the issues that I have is when characters are killed off because the writer does not want to resolve their story. That bugs me. That bugs me a lot. You can have the deaths in the cold world where it's heartless and they died and that sucks, right? But it should not. There's a specific story. Please don't hit that unsubscribe button. But so I got really upset with Hunger Games because I really liked Hunger Games, right? But when it came to the end of it, they had all these characters and they were awesome characters, and then they just started killing. Well, I'm not going to say what happens, but they a lot of them
too late.
A lot of them are killed off, and it felt like it's just like the writer didn't want to basically wrap them up, and it's just like, all right, well they're gone now. It's like, come on.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say you can generally tell how good an author is by how well they treat their characters. It's just yeah. Queen asks, how do you write a child character without making them be too mature, but also not an idiot? I love this question, because I will tell you, some of my favorite characters in existence are kids that actually sound and feel like kids.
Right.
So we recently just got into a show called A Place Further Than a Universe.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that they make these high school end
girls.
of junior high age girls
feel their age
is
incredible.
It's fantastic.
And I feel like most of it boils down to the motivations of the character because okay, you can't don't dumb down the kids because kids will have moments where they'll blow away the adults, right? But what is it in Game of Thrones? Arya, right? She's needing to fend for her own survival and stuff, and she's still debating whether she should risk her life because there's a tart that looks really tasty, and she's like, do I do it or do I not? Like things like that shows she's very much still a kid, even though, there's all these other moments where she can shine and, do things that other kids wouldn't do.
Right. I think another thing that it kind of you can take from kind of writing male or female characters in this case, basically just kind of be like, people are like, why didn't you write good female characters? Is like, well, you just write good characters that happen to be female.
Oh, yeah.
Is basically with the kids, there's some aspect of it where you try to treat them too much like a kid. Now, this works less and less the younger they are, but oftentimes when they're talking about writing a child character, they're able to speak. Okay?
Right.
They're able to think with logic on the very basis of levels.
They won't necessarily have an expanded vocabulary, but,
But I would say you write them as a good character.
Right.
You give them all the things with the plot outline of motivations, beliefs, other people that they're connected to, and then some kind of a why.
Exactly.
And then you just write their dialogue.
Filter.
Put the dialogue filter of a child.
Yep.
One of the things that's frustrating, I know, Jacob, you can attest this because you were kind of a kid genius, is you remember those times as a kid
where
you're trying to communicate something to the freaking adults.
And they don't listen
They
to you
don't
because
listen
you're a
to you
kid.
or understand you.
Right.
Because the means by which you can communicate is
right.
limited because you're a freaking kid and you're like,
Carson!
this is so frustrating.
Yeah.
And this is like 10-year-old Caleb being like, I can't.
Well, or even sometimes younger. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I was like a little kid.
Well,
right?
you were freaky smart as a kid,
but it's still the idea that like I'd be trying to communicate something and I couldn't, so I'd end up crying because I'm like 5, right? And then or something like that, and then the parents think, oh, you need to go to sleep. It's past your bedtime. I'm like, no, that's not it. There's something that I'm trying to tell you, but you're not listening to me, and I don't have the words.
So don't use us as an example. We're freaks, but like with kids, write them as characters.
Yeah.
And then just put the filter through their dialogue.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. Jacob Germana McCrae asks, Caleb, what direction do you think Attack on Titan is going during season 3? Oh.
Jacob, what do you think? What do you feel about the arc season 3 will cover?
Okay, maybe you should not do yours before mine.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
But also like be very careful. Like,
Oh.
I know you will. You will,
me.
of course.
It'll
So
be fine.
with season 3, Attack on Titan, I feel like we need to get. Well, okay, I've seen a trailer. So I know at the very least Levi is going to be a focus. There's some new characters coming in. They have people with ODM gear with like guns or something, like some kind of like whatever thing. And I think that one of the things that they'll need to get into are all the things involving the secrets of like the walls.
Sure.
And kind of the cities as like the city as a whole.
They did
like,
find out that Titans are inside them. Like,
but that's the other thing is specifically the idea of cities. The idea of, the whole city, but also the wherever Ymir came from. That we need to get into basically kind of the truth of the world, basically, like what is actually going on behind the scenes. And then if anything with our main characters, I feel like the main characters have all gotten their baseline kind of stuff figured out. Season 2 was basically like, hey, let's hit all the side characters in that squad so we can get them all like up to shape here. I think that we need to get into more of the like. Remember how the whole theme of it in the second season was Titans are humans and humans are Titans, and now
spoilers for Attack on Titan, by the way.
Oh shoot!
Yeah.
Who hasn't watched Attack on Titan?
I know. Yeah.
Whatever. Point is that I want the lines between good and bad to be blurred a little bit more. Because if they were blurring the lines in that way from the second season, let's get a little bit more literal here. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that I feel like it's going to go. I can't really predict too much because I feel like season 3 is going to deal with all the stuff I'm talking about in like the beginning. But this is going to be a full season, guys. There's no telling.
2 cores.
If you think about the pacing of season 2 compared to season 1, like especially the second half of season 1.
Right.
Season 2's pacing took like a couple days, and they got so much, like, or it was about a week or something. They got so much out of it.
Yep.
If they do something similar with season 3, or even at all touch into that breakneck pacing from the first half of season 1,
right?
Anything could happen.
Yep.
Anything. This is Attack on Titan, so who knows?
Yeah. So the arc that season 3 is about to cover. So I'm excited, but it's also one of those things where, because with how the manga was coming out month to month and stuff, season 2, like what the manga covered, for season 2, was a lot of like execution on things that had previously been set up, right?
Oh,
and,
gotcha.
And it was very like clear, sort of like smaller things that they were doing of just who's the armored and colossal titan, things like that, right? And when I first read the manga for Attack on Titan in what will be season 3,
gotcha,
it felt a little bit like the writer was basically being like, okay, now I've done that stuff that people were waiting for me to to address, and now I'm basically planning out the
next stage of the
story. Right?
I could definitely see that. And because Reiner, Emir, and Bertolt left.
Right.
Like, they're gone. They're out of the story.
Exit stage right. Yeah. Like, so there, because of that, I felt like there were some issues with the manga as far as, like, pacing. But I've heard that with season 3, they're going to be changing some things up because of how long they waited and stuff to basically just make it work better as a full... And this season is 2 cores, so I don't know what they're going to cover, like, really. Like, they could cover... There's a lot. There's a lot of different things they could do with this season, so I'm really excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, guys. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and guys, we are done with the Q&A section for the podcast here. Remember, if you want to have your questions answered, leave them in the comments down below, and they'll be answered in the next podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, until next time, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all. Wait! Not in the next podcast.
That's right.
Special surprise, by the way. We have our lovely Jacoby here going on vacation.
Yes.
Would you like to say where you are going?
Yeah,
We'll keep that a secret.
Well, I mean, if anyone watches to this end, we're not that big of a channel yet.
But, true.
I'm going to be going to Anime Expo. Yes, so if you happen to see me in the crowds of 100,000 people or however many people go there, Jake, say hi.
You're 6'4".
That's true.
Everyone will see you.
That's true. But
all these regular people, and then Jacob's just like, pardon me, and my shoulders and head just kind of bobbing through this massive crowd
I will
of
be
people.
there. So this will be my first convention. I'll get to have my first convention before Rooster Teeth Austin, which will be really cool. So I'll be down there, so I won't be here for the podcast because I'll be there.
Yes. Yeah. So next week's podcast will be a little bit of a surprise, and Jacob will not be involved in the surprise. So,
and we all know how things went last time when Caleb wasn't here for the podcast. So,
yes. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. Yes. So we'll see you then.